Greetings, Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. Happy Valentine's Day, whatever that means. Uh, for those who have been saying that they wanted to share, but it's not really much of an encounter, share anyway, even if it's privately or whatever, because it could be pertinent information as far as the mapping thing that we're doing on the website. So anyway. You can remain anonymous. This comes from we'll name her Mary. She's Etna tribally enrolled First Nations woman. I wouldn't call her an elder, but she's, I wouldn't want to disrespect her. Anyway, so what she wanted to share with us is the first time she heard of the hairy man. She was approximately 8 years old, early 70s, and they were living in Chitina, and this particular elder, tribal elder, was visiting with her mother and was telling her a story about when he was in his youth with some fellow hunters from the village. So they were on the eastern side of the Copper River, up on a flat above Horse Creek. Now, when they were up on the flat above Horse Creek, there was no game around, so they continued searching, going deep inland to find game to hunt, and it was really, really strange. And so they finally come up to this area where there was a hill, and they heard the very creepy feeling in the air, and they were hearing this chattering, this noise coming from over this little hill. So because of the creepy feeling, they decided they'll sneak up to the top and just peek over without silhouetting themselves on the ridge. So they crawl up there, they're doing their thing, being quiet, and they get to the top, and they all look over, and down on the other side in a clearing, there was a group of Sasquatch, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, hairy man. There was a group of them, and it appeared to be different ages and sizes, right? And so immediately they're like, freaked out. I mean, who wouldn't be? And they were observing them for a minute, and the smaller ones looked like they were throwing something back and forth and kicking it around or whatever. And what it ended up being that they noticed, it was a human skull. So immediately, and they started looking a little closer and noticed other piles of bones around. So they were freaked out. They knew they had to leave. So they back on out of there, and on their way to get away from the area, they kept backtracking and changing directions several times. They didn't want any of these things following them back to their village. And that's essentially the first time Mary heard about the hairy man. When she was approximately, I was a little bit later in life, her and her little brother, quarter mile from home. Again, this is in Chitina. They're about a quarter mile from home. They were up on this ridge, and there's a little bit of a draw, and across the way they saw a hairy man walking through the trees. She felt that it was aware of her presence, and it just didn't look at them. It just kept going. So they retreated back home, told her older brother, and the same brother that was with her went back to look for sign. Couldn't find any sign, left it alone. So later in life, she moved away, get an education, had a family, and she always was fond of her memories of living up here in Alaska. So she took her son and daughter and came back up. And as they were driving along back to Fairbanks, they pulled out in this place, and she had always loved hoot owls, the sound of owls in general. She always loved it. So this particular pull off they pulled out to, the kids were small enough that the older child, the daughter, would lay out on the bench seat and so on. So there was room for all of them in the rig they were in. And she was laying there with the window cracked open, just listening to what she thought was owls. So they'd hear an owl hoot and whatnot, until on this ledge beside the truck where they were parked, she heard an owl hoot that halfway through turned into a garbled type of language that she couldn't make out. And immediately her blood ran cold. She was like, immediately realized something was very off because of the number of owl hoots that picked up, this garbled language going back and forth. And her daughter asked, is that owls or people? And she wasn't going to mess with any of it. She fired up the rig and got the hell out of Dodge. Left the area, continued on to Fairbanks. So some years later, her son loved king salmon fishing, just loved it. Wanted to go catch king salmon and whatnot, and they were living in Fairbanks. So she decided to take him back down towards where she's from by the Golconda River near I guess it would be the Golconda Native Village proper, which is near Sourdough Creek, about a mile south of Sourdough Creek. There's an overpass there, and people will line up on the banks and fish for salmon or whatever in that area. So she gets the kids down there. They search around looking for a place, combat fishing, as I call it. I hate that crap. That's why I don't do it down in Kenai, Russian River and all that. I mean, guys are shoulder to shoulder. It's just ridiculous. So anyway, they were looking for a spot, and they couldn't find any decent spot. It was all just packed and crowded, And so they decided, they went, looked around, and ended up on a mine access, or a pipeline access road, just on the other side of the bridge. Turned around, got back in there, parked. It was quiet, no sign of any animals, moose or anything. It was just real quiet where they were. And by this time, it was like 3 or 4 in the morning. So she had chalked it up to, well, everyone's sleeping, getting rest. They'll be out soon, continue fishing. So her and her son, they make their way down the steep bank down to the edge of the river, and they are just below the overpass, a little bit around the bend from it. And so son starts fishing, she starts fishing, they're doing their thing. And after a while, they heard like a conversation or a group of people moving across the river, coming down towards them, but out of view because the brush is so thick, So she assumed, oh, okay, there's some fishermen there. There's some fisher folk there to, cast a lure, wet their line, what have you. So her son wasn't having any luck. And as time went on, they kept hearing this blunk sound of like lures, she assumed, being cast out and then being retrieved. Thought nothing of it. Kept hearing the garbled language, but couldn't make it out. It was always just faint enough to where you couldn't make anything out, which, it didn't startle them at that moment. They thought not much of it, just figured it was people. Because they've been dealing with people at all these places basically all afternoon, where it was combat fishing, people shoulder to shoulder. So she assumed it's just more of that, Excuse me. Choking on my spit. So her son, after having no luck after a few hours of attempting this, decides he's going to go to the other side and see if there's more luck to be had on that side fishing. So she, starts following him back, and he's, of course, excited kid. He's, ahead of her. And they don't have any firearms or bear spray. I don't know. Some people don't. It's just, everyone has their choice in life. Not everyone is constantly worried about the hairy man or a bear. So, fair enough. So her son being ahead of her, she's coming up the access road back towards the main road where the bridge is for him to cross or whatever. And she gets in to see him as he's getting about to the halfway point. And so she's walking along and noticed that he had stopped, and he was looking over off to his left, which had been straight across from her at that point. Too much brush, she couldn't make it out. So she continues walking, and then notice her son starts walking backwards very slowly at first, and obviously really concerned. She thought bear, she was like, oh crap. So she picks up her pace to get up there, and then he comes back and says, we need to go. So she, no questions. She trusts her son. So they skedaddle back to the truck where her daughter was sleeping in there. They had to wake her up in the 4Runner to, let them in or whatever. And they leave, and they got out of there. And on the ride, her son shared with her that he saw a hairy man. The alder shrubs along the river were about 6 to 8 foot tall. He said this thing came, looked at him, looked more like a man than anything, but different. And that was about the gist of it. The explanation of what it looked like. Said it came over, it looked over the brush at him. He saw from about center of the chest up, so 6 to 8 foot plus whatever that would have been, 8, 9 foot, maybe a little more. Said it looked at him and his blood ran cold. That's when he started backing away. He told his mom that he was immediately fearful, felt like this thing wanted to kill him. And so he backed out of there. It said as soon as he started backing away, it turned around and walked off. Now, and she trusted him, so they got out of there when he finally told her after a little bit on the drive back home. There's a lot of encounters like that. People who have had many encounters over the years from childhood. I'm personally one of them. Miss Mary, as we'll call her, she's another one. Gosh, it goes on and on. And for those of you who hesitate to share your experience because you don't feel it's like, this channel isn't about just scary experiences. This is just the stuff that happens. It's not like, oh, I sort through for the scary ones. No, I receive them, I call, talk to the people, and I share with you guys. I don't cherry pick and I don't gatekeep whatever comes in. I share it with you guys. Well, I mean, I shared the female rescue in Dan, which really tripped me out to hear. But if I was more worried about scariness or whatever, I wouldn't have even shared that. So don't be bashful to share your experiences, because it's the majority of them, if you couldn't tell, are the hairy man makes noise, the people recognize, and they get the hell out of Dodge. I mean, that's the overall running theme of what ends up happening. Although there are those cases where shots are fired. These things came into camp. These things have killed dogs. So it runs the gambit. So don't hold back because you don't feel it's worthy of like, this isn't about scary stories. This is about the reality of what's going on in Bush, Alaska. And let's be honest, in Alaska, you step off the road, you're in remote Alaska. There's no way around it. Grant you, there may be houses closer by, but I get reports from literally all over, whether it's road system or remote, or regardless, get the reports all the time. So feel free to share. And again, I want to thank Mary for sharing her basically a lifetime of experiences, and grant you, outside of that experience an elder shared with their mom, that it was basically intuition and whatnot that got them out of there without a bunch of high craziness, a bunch of strangeness going on. It was basically they saw and left type of deal. Again, thank you, Mary. And also, let's see, I was trying to remember if there was something else. Offhand, I can't remember. And again, happy Valentine's Day or whatever. I'm not big on that engineered crap. However, some are. And for those guys spending all that money, I feel sorry for you, man. But anyway, I'll quit picking on you. You guys have a good one, and we'll catch you on the next one.